There are moments in life that feel like nothing, a delay, a small inconvenience. A Tuesday morning that starts wrong and seems determined to stay that way. You miss your coffee window. Your phone dies before you can answer a message. The elevator closes right in front of your face. You stand there staring at the metal doors and you think, seriously, this is my morning. We've all been there. That low-grade irritation that sits right behind your eyes and colors everything around it a dull shade of gray. The feeling that the universe, for whatever reason, has decided to make you its personal project today. Nothing catastrophic, nothing worth calling your mother about. Just the slow, grinding accumulation of small things going wrong at exactly the wrong time. And here's what we do in those moments. We sigh. We check our watch. We mutter something under our breath that we wouldn't repeat in polite company. We tell ourselves it's fine, it doesn't matter, move on, while secretly cataloging every minor injustice into a growing list titled Reasons Today is Already Ruined. But what if I told you that one of those moments, one of those nothing moments, was actually the most important thing that ever happened to you? What if the delay wasn't a delay at all? What if the universe, in its strange and indifferent wisdom, was doing something for you that you had absolutely no language to understand in the moment? I want to tell you about a morning that changed everything. Not in a dramatic way, not at first. In the most ordinary, frustrating, completely forgettable way possible. A morning where a man stood on a sidewalk in the cold, watching something pull away from the curb without him, and felt his day collapse before it had even truly started. That man was furious. He was late. He was tired. He was already running the mental math of everything that was now going to go wrong because of this one small failure. He had done everything right, or close enough to right, and it still hadn't been enough. The city, the traffic, the slow elevator, the neighbor who wanted to talk for exactly 30 seconds longer than he had to give, all of it had conspired to put him on that sidewalk at the wrong moment, watching the wrong thing happen. He didn't know, standing there in the cold with his jaw tight and his hands shoved deep into his coat pockets, that he was standing exactly where he needed to be. He didn't know that the thing pulling away from the curb without him was not a punishment, it was protection. There is a version of this story that is just a story. Something that happened to someone somewhere, filed under the vast category of things that almost happened to me. We have all heard stories like this, haven't we? The friend who slept through her alarm and missed a flight that went down in bad weather. The coworker who got stuck in traffic and was 3 miles away when the building he worked in flooded. The grandfather who stopped to tie his shoe on the way to a meeting and walked into minutes late to find out the meeting had been moved to a different floor, which happened to be the floor where he ran into the woman he would spend the next 47 years married to. We hear these stories and we feel something complicated. Part of us is moved. Part of us is skeptical. Part of us wants to believe and another part of us resists belief the way the body resists a fever, instinctively, defensively, because believing costs something. If these things are not coincidences, then what are they? If the small delays and the missed buses and the spilled coffees are not just noise, if they are, in some way we can barely articulate, signal, then we have to be willing to look at our lives very differently. We have to be willing to entertain the uncomfortable idea that we do not always know what is good for us. That our frustration, as real and as valid as it feels, is sometimes pointing in exactly the wrong direction. That the thing we are fighting against might be the thing holding us together, that is a hard thing to sit with. It requires a certain kind of humility that does not come naturally to people who are already late, already cold, already muttering under their breath on a sidewalk in the middle of a city that does not care about them at all. I want you to close your eyes for a moment, not literally, because you are reading this, but in the way you close your eyes when someone says imagine and you actually do. Imagine a morning, the specific texture of it. The kind of morning that has that faint metallic taste of things already going sideways. The light is flat, the air is damp. Your breakfast was wrong somehow, not bad, just slightly off, the way a note can be slightly sharp without being broken. You are running at about 70% and the day is already demanding 100. You leave your building, you walk the 2 blocks. You round the corner, and you see it. The back end of the bus, the exhaust rising in the cold air. The doors already closed, the vehicle already moving. You pick up your pace for a single, humiliating moment, the universal human instinct to chase what is leaving, and then you stop, because it is already gone. And the only thing left to do is stand there and feel the specific kind of bad that comes from being 1 second too late. 20 minutes until the next one. 20 minutes in the cold. 20 minutes to be angry, to recalculate, to mentally compose a version of this story in which you are the victim of timing and bad luck and a bus driver who absolutely could have waited. Now hold that image, that feeling, that cold, still, quietly furious moment on the sidewalk. Because what happens next, what happens in those 20 minutes while you stand there, is the reason I am telling you this story at all. Something is about to happen to that bus, and you are about to understand, with a clarity that feels almost violent in its suddenness, that the worst moment of your morning was actually the moment your life turned quietly, invisibly, in your favor. We talk about luck as if it were a resource distributed unfairly. Some people have it and some people don't, and the difference between the two categories is mostly mystery, mostly birth, mostly the arbitrary favor of a cosmos that makes no promises and keeps no appointments. But there is another way to think about luck, a harder way. A way that requires you to hold to contradictory things at the same time, that life is largely chaotic and uncontrolled, and that within that chaos there are moments that seem to curve in your direction, that seem to adjust themselves around the fact of you, as if the universe occasionally remembers your name. Not always, not reliably, not in a way you can plan for or count on. But sometimes you miss the bus. And 20 minutes later you understand exactly why. This is the story of one of those mornings. It is the story of a delay, a discovery, and a question that has no clean answer but is worth asking anyway. It is the story of a man standing in the cold, furious and small and completely unaware that he is being held, not held back, not held down, but held, the way a hand on a shoulder sometimes means wait, not yet, there is something you need to see first. By the time this story is over, I hope the way you look at the inconveniences in your own life will have changed. Not because everything happens for a reason. Maybe it doesn't. Maybe the universe is as indifferent as it looks on a flat, damp morning when the bus pulls away without you. But maybe, just maybe, what irritates you today is the thing that is quietly, invisibly, keeping you safe. Stay with me. His name was Daniel. Not that the name matters much in stories, not a chosen, symbolic name. Just a name. The name his mother gave him on a Wednesday in late October, 31 years before, in a hospital room smelling of antiseptic and new beginnings. Daniel. A man of moderate height, ambitions, and luck. Not the kind of person things happen to dramatically. He showed up, did the work, went home, and woke up to do it again. Like most, not a small thing, even if it rarely feels enough. He lived in a one-bedroom apartment on the 4th floor. The elevator worked 60% of the time, giving him a complicated relationship with stairs. He knew every step, which one creaked. He knew the 3rd floor landing smelled of cooking on Tuesday and Thursday nights. This smell made him feel more at home in a city that often made him feel like a variable in someone else's equation. He worked at a logistics company downtown, coordinating shipments, managing spreadsheets, answering emails using urgent to often. For years there, he was good at it, not brilliant or passionate, but genuinely good. It fit his mind without setting it on fire. His boss respected him, colleagues liked him. His desk by a window overlooked a narrow alley. On clear mornings, it turned gold for 11 minutes. Those 11 minutes were, quietly, his favorite part of the workday. This is who Daniel was the morning everything changed. Not a hero, not at a crossroads, just a man in a coat carrying a bag, eating a granola bar because he hadn't time for breakfast. The alarm went off 6 minutes late, set for 6:47 instead of 6:41. 6 minutes. The entire architecture of what was about to happen was built on 6 minutes. The morning had that quality of certain autumn mornings, not quite cold enough to be uncomfortable, but cold enough to remind you comfort is temporary. Daniel walked quickly, the way people in cities learn to walk, not rushing, but with a deliberate efficiency. He passed the dry cleaner never open when needed. He passed the corner store where the man always nodded. He passed chalk words on the sidewalk, rained on, now illegible, just ghost marks on concrete. He turned the corner onto Meridian Street. And there it was, Route 14, his bus. Sitting at the stop with its doors open, a small crowd shuffling on, the driver a vague shape behind glass. Daniel felt the small, reliable relief of someone who has almost been late and has, this time, gotten away with it. He had done this 100 times. The distance was manageable, the doors were still open. He had maybe 30 seconds, comfortably. And then the neighbor from the second floor stepped out of the building's side entrance directly into his path, Mrs. Carrasco, 73 years old. White hair pinned up with precision, she had the unsteady forward momentum of a person whose body had decided confidence must compensate. Daniel stopped, not because he chose to, but because something human was in front of him. To keep moving would be to become the kind of person he was not. It was automatic. It was the stopping of a person whose instincts are, at their core, decent. "Oh, Daniel," she said, with the relief of someone hoping someone would appear. "I keep meaning to ask someone to show me how to work that new recycling bin." He helped her, of course he helped her. He took the bags, showed her the new system, exchanged 30 seconds of small talk. About the weather, her daughter, the broken elevator. Mrs. Carrasco had opinions Daniel found entirely justified. It took exactly 4 minutes, plus the 6 he had already lost to the alarm. He turned back toward Meridian Street and he knew before he rounded the corner. He knew the way you know when a thing has already happened. He rounded the corner and he saw the street, and the street was empty in the specific way a street is empty after a bus has just left it. Not absent, but recently vacated, the air still slightly disturbed, the stop sign standing there with the mild indifference of metal. Gone. He stood on the sidewalk with his granola bar and his bag and his coat and the pale sky above him. He felt the irritation arrive the way irritation always arrives, not with a bang but with a slow, spreading heat behind the sternum. He checked his watch. 7:23, next bus, 7:43, 20 minutes. He exhaled slowly through his nose. He looked up at the sky. He considered calling the office, then decided against it. Being late by 20 minutes felt like something to be absorbed quietly, without announcement, without the drama of explanation. He found a spot near the bus shelter, not inside it, because a man was eating something warm from a paper bag. He stood and he waited and he was, in the particular and legitimate way of a person who has done everything approximately right and still ended up here, quietly furious. Not at Mrs. Carrasco. He was not the kind of person who would be furious at Mrs. Carrasco, at the alarm, at the 6 minutes, at the dry compounding of small things that had added up to this, a sidewalk, a cold morning, 20 minutes of his life standing still. He took a bite of his granola bar. He watched a pigeon navigate the gutter with the focused intensity of an animal for whom the gutter is the entire world. He did not know, yet. He did not know what was happening, right now, 3 miles ahead on Route 14's path. On the overpass above Kellner Avenue, where the road curved slightly and the guardrail, on the left side had been showing stress fractures for 8 months. Noted in a maintenance report that had been filed and refiled and flagged and then absorbed into the slow bureaucratic digestion of a city. He did not know about the frost that had settled into those fractures overnight. He did not know about the delivery truck that had drifted slightly left on that same curve every morning for the past 2 weeks, its driver compensating with the casual expertise of someone who has done something enough times to stop being careful about it. He did not know any of this. He just knew he had missed his bus. And he was irritated. And he was wrong. There is a particular quality to waiting that we do not talk about enough. Not the waiting we choose, the waiting in line for something we want, the waiting for a table at a restaurant we have been looking forward to, the anticipatory waiting that has pleasure woven through it like a thread you can feel if you press your fingers together just right. That kind of waiting is tolerable. That kind of waiting has a shape, a destination, a reason to exist. I am talking about the other kind. The waiting that is imposed. The waiting that arrives without invitation and settles in like a guest who does not read the room. The waiting that happens on sidewalks in the cold when you have somewhere to be and no good way to get there faster and nothing to do but stand inside the minutes as they pass with their particular unhurried indifference. This is the waiting Daniel was doing, and there is something that happens to a person in that kind of waiting if they stay in it long enough without reaching for their phone, without plugging their ears with music, without performing the modern ritual of filling every empty second with input so that the self never has to be alone with itself for more than a breath. Something shifts, not dramatically, not the way things shift in movies, with swelling music and a slow zoom and a look on the actor's face that tells you something important is being understood. More quietly than that, more the way light shifts in a room when a cloud passes, you are not sure, exactly, when it changed. Only that it has. Daniel stood at the bus stop and he did not reach for his phone. This was not a conscious decision in any noble sense. His phone was buried in the inside pocket of his coat, and the coat required both hands to open, and his hands were occupied, one with the granola bar, one shoved into his outer pocket against the cold, and the small friction of retrieval was, on this particular morning, just enough to delay the reflex. So instead of reaching for the screen, he stood, he chewed, he watched, and the city, as cities do when you actually look at them, began to perform. Across the street, a woman in a red coat was having what appeared to be a significant argument with a parking meter. Not the meter itself, obviously. She was on her phone, pacing a tight oval on the sidewalk, her free hand moving in the emphatic, sculptural way of someone making a point they have already made several times and intend to keep making until it lands. She was, Daniel thought, either very angry or very passionate, and he was not sure those were entirely different things. Every few seconds she would stop pacing and look up at the sky with the expression of a person asking a question of the architecture and finding the architecture unhelpful. He watched her for a while. He did not know her story. He invented 3 versions of it: the work call gone wrong, the difficult family conversation, the argument with someone she loved enough to fight this hard in public, and then abandoned all 3 because none of them felt right and it did not matter anyway. She was just a person in a red coat, carrying something heavy that he could not see. Aren't we all, he thought, with the mild, unsurprised philosophy of someone who has stood on enough sidewalks to understand that cities are full of invisible weight being carried in public without acknowledgement. Next to the bus shelter, a child of about 5 was crouched down over a crack in the sidewalk with the focused intensity of a scientist examining something genuinely new. His mother stood nearby, holding 2 bags, giving him the slightly impatient leash of a few feet of freedom. The child poked at whatever was in the crack with a small stick. He looked up at the sky. He looked back down. He said something, Daniel could not hear what, and the mother said something back, and the child laughed with the whole body abandon that only children laugh with. The kind of laugh that has not yet learned to be self-conscious, that does not yet know it is being watched, that exists entirely for itself and the moment and the crack in the sidewalk and whatever small miracle it contained. Daniel found himself smiling, not a big smile. The small, involuntary kind that happens before you know it is happening, the face doing something true before the mind can curate it. He finished the granola bar. He folded the wrapper carefully and put it in his pocket, the way his mother had taught him, on a different sidewalk, in a different city, when he was not much older than the child with the stick. The man with the paper bag on the bench had finished eating and was now doing something with a small notebook, writing, or drawing. Daniel could not tell which. He held the pen in the way certain people hold pens, with a grip that suggested the pen had been held that way for a very long time, a grip that was not taught but developed, worn into muscle memory through repetition and years. Whatever he was putting onto the page, he was doing it with complete absorption. The city could have folded itself in half around him and he would not have looked up. Daniel recognized that quality. He had seen it in his own face once, in a photograph taken by a friend at a party years ago. He had been reading something on someone's bookshelf, had pulled a book out and opened it and been taken somewhere else entirely, and the photograph had caught him in that somewhere else, his face quiet and removed and entirely his own. He had liked that photograph more than almost any other photograph of himself. Not because he looked good in it, because he looked real. He wondered what the man was writing. He wondered what his own face looked like right now, on this sidewalk, in this ordinary pause between the life he had been moving through and the life he was about to return to. 12 minutes had passed. He knew this not because he had checked his watch, he hadn't, but because he had begun to measure time in the rhythms of the street. 2 buses had gone by, neither of them his. A garbage truck had made its slow, grinding progress down the block and disappeared around the corner. The woman in the red coat had finished her call and walked away in the direction of whatever the call had been about, her stride carrying the specific forward momentum of someone who has decided something. The child with the stick had been convinced, through what appeared to be gentle negotiation, to stand up and keep walking with his mother. The man with the notebook was still writing. The city breathed in, the city breathed out. Daniel stood in the middle of it and felt, unexpectedly, something that was almost the opposite of irritation. He would not have called it peace. That would be too large a word for too small a moment. But there was something the loosening, maybe. A slight release of the tension that had been sitting across his shoulders since the alarm had gone off at 6:47 instead of 6:41. The city was not doing anything different. The morning was not different. He was the same person, in the same coat with the same bag and the same day waiting for him downtown. Nothing had changed except that he had been standing still long enough for the irritation to use itself up, the way a small fire will burn itself out if you stop feeding it. And in the space that the irritation had occupied, something else had moved in. He was not sure what to call it. Attention, maybe, presence, the particular quality of being in a place and actually being there, instead of moving through it on the way to somewhere else. He had walked past this corner hundreds of times. He had stood at this bus stop dozens of times. He had never, not once, watched it the way he was watching it now. He had never noticed the gargoyle on the building across the street, small, weathered, its face worn into something between a scowl and a grin by decades of rain and city air. He had never noticed that the pavement at this particular corner was a slightly different color than the pavement around it. A warmer gray, as if it had been replaced more recently, or as if it had simply aged differently from everything around it, taking the years in a way that suited it better. He noticed these things now. He stood in the cold and he noticed them, and he did not reach for his phone, and he did not perform impatience for anyone because there was no one watching and there was no point, and the granola bar was gone and there was nothing left to do but be exactly where he was for exactly as long as it took. 8 minutes left, and then his phone buzzed. Not a call. A notification from a news app he had downloaded 6 months ago during a period when he had convinced himself he would stay more informed and had since mostly ignored. He rarely checked it. He checked it now, because the buzz had broken the spell of his watching and his hand was already in his coat before the more deliberate part of his mind had decided anything. He looked at the notification. He read it once. He read it again. The screen was small and the light was flat and the words were very clear, and his mind did the thing minds do when they receive information they are not prepared for. It skipped. Briefly, like a record with a scratch, reading the words but not yet converting them into meaning, letting them sit on the surface of understanding without sinking in. He read them a third time. And then the meaning came, not gradually. All at once, the way cold water arrives when you step into it, there is no getting used to it incrementally. There is only the moment before and the moment after, and the breath you take between them. His hand tightened around the phone. The gargoyle across the street watched him with its ambiguous stone face, neither scowling nor grinning, or perhaps both at once. 6 minutes until his bus. He barely noticed. The notification read, "Accident on Kellner Avenue overpass. Multiple vehicles involved. Route 14 bus among those affected. Emergency services on scene." That was all. 11 words after the headline, 11 words that sat on the screen of his phone with the flat, administrative column of information. The news app did not know about Daniel. It did not know about the 6 minutes and the alarm and Mrs. Carrasco, and the recycling bins and the 4 minutes of small talk about the elevator. It did not know that Daniel had been on that route every working morning for years, that he knew the driver by sight if not by name, that he had a specific seat he preferred. Third row, right side, window, and that on most mornings he spent the ride watching the city scroll past with half-present attention. The app just knew what had happened, not to whom, not what it meant. Just the bare geography of it, the cold coordinates of an event. Overpass, vehicles, Route 14, emergency services. Daniel stared at the screen. The first thing he felt was not fear, not relief, not vertigo. The first thing he felt was the specific confusion of a mind trying to locate itself in new information, the internal equivalent of waking up. In a room you do not immediately recognize, that half-second of pure blankness before context assembles itself around you and tells you where you are. He was standing at a bus stop on Meridian Street. He had missed his bus. His bus was on an overpass above Kellner Avenue. Something had happened on that overpass. He ran the logic again and again. Not because he did not understand it, but because understanding it and feeling it were two entirely different operations, and the second one was taking longer than the first. He searched for more. The deliberate, slightly frantic searching of a person who has been given the outline of a thing and needs the interior of it immediately. Who cannot sit with the shape of something this large without knowing what is inside it. He typed into the search bar with clumsy urgency. Of cold fingers and a mind that was moving faster than his hands. Local news, traffic reports, anything with Kellner Avenue and this morning's date. And the words that would tell him what had actually happened, not just that something had. The first article loaded slowly. The way pages load when you need them instantly, with the particular cruelty of buffering. Then it was there. He read it standing on the sidewalk, with the cold still doing its work on the back of his neck and the city moving around him, with complete indifference to what he was reading and what it was doing to him. The overpass above Kellner Avenue had a section of guardrail on its left curve that had been compromised. A delivery truck, eastbound, moderate speed, had drifted into the curve the way it apparently drifted into the curve every morning, and this morning the frost had done what frost does to compromise metal, and the guardrail had given way. And the truck had clipped the bus as it corrected, and the bus had, the article used the word skidded, which is a word that contains a great deal of terror if you let yourself think about what it describes, skidded and come to rest at an angle across two lanes, partially against what remained of the guardrail structure, above a 40-foot drop to the street below. Partially against. The article was careful with its language. The way journalism is careful when the full picture is still assembling itself. It said multiple injuries reported. It said severity not yet confirmed. It said passengers evacuated and emergency services on scene and investigation ongoing and all the other phrases that are built to convey information, while managing the emotional temperature of the person receiving it. But Daniel was not reading for emotional temperature management. He was reading for one thing. He was reading to understand how close, and the answer, assembled from the careful journalistic language and the geography he knew, and the image his mind was constructing with involuntary, architectural precision, was close enough that the difference between being on that bus and not being on that bus was not a comfortable abstraction. It was not the kind of near miss you hear about secondhand and feel briefly grateful about and then file away under things that didn't happen to me. It was the kind that has a physical address, a specific seat, third row, right side, window, the right side. The side that had come to rest against the broken guardrail above 40 feet of open air. He put his phone in his pocket. He stood very still. The bus stop around him continued to be a bus stop. A woman walked past with a dog that paused to investigate something near the shelter before being guided onward. A car slowed for the light, and its radio leaked a few bars of something with a lot of bass before the light changed and the car moved on. The man with the notebook on the bench had looked up at some point and was now watching the street with the calm, receptive gaze of someone who understands that they always eventually offer something worth seeing. Daniel became aware, gradually, that he was holding his breath. He let it out. It came out longer than he expected, as if there had been more of it stored than he knew, as if his body had been quietly holding something in reserve, waiting for the moment when it was safe to release it. His shoulders dropped about half an inch. His jaw unclenched, in a way that told him, only in the unclenching, how tightly it had been held. He took another breath, cold air, city air. The faint distant smell of coffee from somewhere nearby, the mineral smell of pavement and the morning. He took it in slowly and let it out. Slowly and did it again, standing there on the sidewalk with his bag and his empty granola bar wrapper in his pocket and the knowledge sitting in the center of his chest like something that had weight and temperature, something real, something that would need to be carried differently than the things he usually carried. He thought about his seat, third row, right side, window. He thought about the 11 minutes every morning when the light came in at the right angle and turned the alley outside his office window gold. He thought about Mrs. Carrasco and her recycling bins and her daughter who had visited last weekend and her opinions about the elevator, which were entirely justified. He thought about his mother, in her house in a different city, who called on Sundays and always asked how he was eating, because that was her language for I love you, and he had always understood this even when it annoyed him, which it sometimes did, which he was not proud of. He thought about the granola bar. The granola bar he had grabbed because he had not had time to make breakfast because the alarm had gone off 6 minutes late because he had been tired the night before. The granola bar that had required one hand to hold, which had meant both hands occupied, which had meant his phone stayed in his pocket, which had meant he had stood on this sidewalk for 12 minutes watching the city instead of scrolling through it, which had led, indirectly, absurdly, in the way that life is, always constructing its most important moments out of the most unimportant materials, to the moment he had noticed the notification, which had led to this, to standing here, intact, breathing city air, alive to the cold on the back of his neck and the weight of his bag and the completely ordinary miracle of being a person standing on a sidewalk on a Tuesday morning in autumn with somewhere to be and a body to get there. The 7:43 arrived. He almost did not get on it. Not because he was afraid, or not only because of that, but because there was something happening in him that felt fragile in the way new things are fragile, the way a thought is fragile. In the moment just before it becomes fully formed, when it is still more feeling than language and you sense that moving too quickly might lose it. He stood at the open doors for a beat longer than necessary. The driver, a different driver, not the one from Route 14, a man with a gray beard and reading glasses pushed up on his forehead, glanced at him with the mild, professional patience of someone who has waited for many hesitant boarders and will wait for many more. Daniel got on. He found a seat, not his usual seat. Not the third row, right side, window. He sat in the second row, left side, aisle, and he did not look out the window. And he did not check his phone, and he did not run the mental math of his delayed arrival and what it would mean for his morning, and how he would explain it. He just sat. He watched the city move past the windows the way you watch something you are seeing for the first time, or seeing again after a long absence, with the specific attention of someone who knows, on some cellular level, that the thing they are looking at is not guaranteed, that presence is not a given, that the world outside the window is not a backdrop to the life being lived inside it, but the life itself, immediate and particular and passing and real. A street, a corner, a woman walking a dog, a child being walked to school, backpack bouncing with each step, a man in a doorway drinking coffee and looking up at the sky, with the expression of someone checking a fact. A tree, one tree, specifically, on the left side of a block he passed every morning, that had gone fully gold overnight, as if it had been holding its color in reserve and had decided, today, this particular Tuesday, to spend it all. At once, he looked at the tree. He felt something move through him that he did not have a clean word for, not gratitude exactly, though it contained gratitude, not relief exactly, though it contained relief. Something older than both of those, something that did not require language to be real, but that he found himself, quietly, trying to name anyway, sitting on a bus in the second row, left side, aisle, on a morning that had started wrong and turned into something else entirely, something he would spend a long time understanding, something he suspected he would still be turning over in his hands years from now, holding it up to different lights to see what it showed him. The tree fell behind him. The city kept going. He kept going with it.